The Pro-LGBT Cardinal, who had a leading role in drafting the 1992 Catechism of the Catholic Church, is saying it could be rewritten to accommodate homosexuals. Join us with the latest from the Eternal City Church Militant's Rome correspondent, Dr. Jules Gomes. Jules, rumor has it that parts of the Catechism of the Catholic Church may soon be rewritten so they won't offend those with a homosexual bent. Is there any truth to this?
And Brad, the Catechism of the Catholic Church has one of the strongest statements on homosexuality. It says that the homosexual inclination is objectively disordered. Now, people like the Austrian Cardinal Christoph Schönborn, who is Cardinal Archbishop of Vienna, and one of the most radical pro-LGBT cardinals and bishops in the world, he is virtually calling for sanitizing this offensive language from the Catechism. And at a press conference recently on the synodal discussions, he basically said that, this ought to happen, appealing to the Synod fathers and mothers to back this change. He did say that only the Pope can authorize this change because he is the one who promulgated the Catechism. But let me quote his exact words. He provided the Synod with a basis on which, or a precedent on which this change could be promulgated. He said, it is no secret, and I can say so, Pope John Paul II already wished that the death penalty in the Catechism would be explicitly condemned. Then I was told that Pope Francis took action and introduced this change, because we know that Pope Francis reversed the teaching in the Catechism and declared the death penalty inadmissible. Cardinal Schönborn, interestingly, also quoted Mother Teresa, now Saint Teresa of Calcutta, and he said that she had also asked St. John Paul II to explicitly condemn the death penalty in the Catechism.
Yeah, and we know that John Paul II didn't condemn it. He did uphold in principle that it can be used. He just really wanted it used the least sparingly because of the culture of death in our time. Now, it's interesting. Schönborn used to fly different colors. Back under John Paul II, he was seen as a very orthodox, conservative, and that's why he was tapped to do, as you were saying, the 1992 Catechism. He was the lead editor on that project. Now, paragraph 2358 of what's been known as the second edition, officially promulgated in 97, the Catechism of the Catholic Church. This is how it actually reads. This was promulgated under John Paul II, kind of corrected Schönborn's writing from 92. And in 1997 it read, and this is the one we're familiar with, the number of men and women who have deep-seated homosexual tendencies is not negligible. This inclination, which is objectively disordered, constitutes for most of them a trial. Now, how does that compare to the first edition, drafted principally by Schönborn, and that rolled out in 92 in the French and 94 in the English? Was there any key differences between the two editions, specifically on this verse?
That's a very good question, Brad. Yes, there was a significant change made in the second edition of the Catechism. So, for example, the paragraph 2358, which you have just referred to, in the second edition says that the inclination, which is objectively disordered, constitutes for most of them a trial. But in the first edition, that had been out for 5 years before that, the English version very clearly said they do not choose their homosexual condition. For most of them, it is a trial. Now, note that the original edition of the Catechism, published in English in 1994, did not include the words objectively disordered and added the words they do not choose their homosexual condition. And, this almost seemed to condone the acts that follow from this condition, because if you don't choose your condition, you're kind of trapped, and you are not responsible for what you do. Now, perhaps there has been a change because gay activists, very high-profile gay activists, have now moved on and basically are now saying, well, we are not born homosexual. We quite often we choose to be homosexual. I mean, they become so defiant. And that may not have had any impact on this rewriting, but it is interesting to know the shift in the LGBT apologetics.
This really reminds me, Jules, before moving on, as a sidebar just popped into my mind, the diagnostic manual for psychologists in 1973
Yes.
Dropped the whole disordered thing
Yes.
under pressure of the LGBT, and we've reported on that, and it's kind of a wide. But prior to that, even the doctors were all saying, nope, so the presentation even changed in the medical field there, which was very interesting. So, if they changed the catechism, that really wouldn't be anything new, nor would it really change church teaching. At worst, it would just mask over church teaching. Your thoughts on that?
Well, it would not send out a good signal at all. You're absolutely right in saying it cannot change church teaching, because church teaching is anchored, rooted and grounded in sacred scripture. And obviously you cannot change biblical teaching on homosexuality, even though, as you and I pointed out very recently in our Rome Dispatch on the Jerome Biblical Commentary for the 21st century, liberal Catholic biblical scholars are desperately trying to say that, well, the biblical authors did not really understand homosexual orientation, and so it would be ethically irresponsible to apply their conclusions to contemporary understanding of same-sex relationships. But because this opens doors to things like gay blessings, etc. That is why the activists in the church are so fiercely pushing. And if you remember Father James Martin, the famous homosexualist Jesuit, in his 2017 book, Building Bridges, again talked about getting rid of this, so-called offensive language on homosexuality in the Catechism.
Yeah, no, he's sitting at table 28 at the Synod, as we know, and I'm sure that he's one of the Synod fathers who was actually asking for this, because, as you mentioned, he's already been out there with, in 2017, his book, Building Bridge, to discuss this, to advocate for this very thing, change the catechism, water it down. Schönborn, to his credit, did distinguish between objective church teaching and how it's presented to, in the subjective forum to people. And I think it's completely off base when you water down truth for anyone. I know, Jules, that you're specifically, personally, opposed to watering down the truth, and you see the church as a hero in the culture wars, and the clarity of truth is a spear that is running at, fighting ignorance and darkness and all that. Can you bring that out for the people?
Well, because I've been working during my time in England and in Great Britain with groups, whether Anglicans or Orthodox Jewish or Muslims, who've been fighting these culture wars quite often together, particularly opposing school curriculum that is indoctrinating children in the whole LGBTQIA agenda. And many of them, particularly at a time when so many different churches and denominations are beginning to capitulate to the homosexualist bandwagon, juggernaut really, these groups have found in the Catholic Catechism a very clear statement of what the church teaches. And irrespective of the fact that many of them are not Catholic, they have drawn support, encouragement, and inspiration from this particular teaching. So it would be a great blow to them and to many people, both within and without the Catholic Church, if this teaching were to be changed and revised. And it would amount, Brad, to a sanitization of the Catechism of the Catholic Church, but it would also even further undermine its credibility as something that is a reference point for most Catholics.
Absolutely. Well, of course, the Pope can, as Schönborn said, decide to rewrite a portion of the Catechism. We've already seen that with the death penalty, soften the language or whatever, but that doesn't change the truth of the matter, nor Catholic teaching, which is rooted in that truth. It may make that teaching a little less clear, and that would be lamentable. Pray that we have clear Catholic teaching for all people in all situations. All people deserve the truth. Jules, thank you so much for your report and for the story behind the story.
Thank you, Brad.
Thanks again for watching today's episode of Rome Dispatch. This show is brought to you by donors like Real Estate for Life. If you're looking to buy or sell a home and want to support our mission, visit realestateforlife.org. Again, that's realestateforlife.org. Be sure to tell them Church Militant sent you. God bless.